Hi there, BookTube. It's Roz. I've been away for a little while, haven't I? Slightly unintentionally. This seems to happen to me every year. At the end of October, it's like I'm all booktubed out, and I take 2 or 3 weeks off. And even if I don't plan it, I should just know that that's probably going to happen. And so sorry about that, but I'm back, and slightly belatedly, this is my December reading plans TBR, pile of possibilities video to get me going again. Not that I've stopped reading, obviously, because, I never do that. Now, December's a funny month for reading for me because it's a bit of a combination of things, because there's always some reading events that I fancy taking part in, but it's also the one time of year when I'm remotely tempted to read vaguely seasonally. And it's also a time when I'm thinking, was there anything that I really meant to get to this year that I haven't yet? And can I, squeeze that in? So my TBR is a mix of those things. One thing I definitely have to read this month is this one. The Wind Knows My Name by Isabel Allende. Why? Because this is the 12th and final book in the Reading the Globe contemporary fiction strand. And so every month in 2025, Katya and of Page Turns with Katya and I have been hosting a group read of a work of global fiction. And as I say, this is the last one. I've been reading Isabel Allende since the 1980s, but I haven't read any of her really recent books. And, she's still in her 80s and still publishing novels. So I'll be interested to see, what one of her current ones is like. This one came out in 2023. It's translated by Francis Riddle, excellent translator from Spanish. It's about 2 stories, half a century apart, of migrant children. So that's that one. Join us if you fancy it. While I'm thinking about it, I should mention that on Sunday, the 6th of December, Katya and I are doing a live show, it's on my channel, about our November book, The Understory by Sani Sangsuk. Really intriguing Thai novel about kind of storytelling and the jungle. Anyway, putting that to one side. Another of the strands of Reading the Globe this year has been 6 books that were middle grade or YA, and that was hosted by Katya and Jack of Spread Book Joy. And I'm definitely going to read, or rather reread, the November-December book for that, because it is Moominpapa by At Sea by Tove Jansson. And I like Tove Jansson's writing, including her novels for adults, but I just adore the Moominland stories, and I adored them as a child, and I adore them still. This one was, I think that I got this copy when I was 10. The translator, not that it was harder to find in children's books, isn't it, was by Kingsley Hart, and this is my copy from 1974 when it was first published as a puffin paperback, and so pocket money affordable. It cost 30p at the time, and I'd been reading the Moomin books for a few years by then, by the time I was 10, but still really enjoying them, because although they're written for children, they are they're not simplistic. They're psychologically quite sophisticated, which, as a child reader, I think I recognised and appreciated. This one, Moominpapa at Sea, I recall as being particularly moving, I think, and philosophical. Anyway, I'm looking forward to rereading it. Now, there are so many books, newly published books, that I wanted to read and hope to read in 2025, and some of them I've got to, and I've talked about them, here with you, and others I haven't quite managed to get to yet. And Can I squeeze some into September? Well, I'm going to try and go for 2. One of those is Seascraper by Benjamin Wood. Now, readers that I really trust have just so enthused about Seascraper, and so many people have said, they really were disappointed that it didn't make the Bookish shortlist and so on. So, I really feel it's a must read for me, and I'm definitely going to fit that in. Another one that I hope to fit came out even more recently, and that's The Wax Child by Olga Ravn. It was translated from the Swedish by Maria Aitken. Steve, my husband, is reading it at the moment and says I would love it. It's about it's based around a 17th century witch trial in Denmark. And did I say it was translated from the Swedish? I meant the Danish. Forgive me, Denmark, for trying to attribute it to Sweden. So, hoping to get to that one. Sounds like I love a bit of historical fiction. It sounds like my kind of theme, I suppose. So, that's all the newer things that I expect or hope to read in December. Everything else that I'm going to read is at least 40 years old, and some of them significantly longer. Now, I think I've said that I kind of quite associate Christmas with a bit of crime, a bit of detective fiction always feels nice at this time of year. But also there is a December reading event that I try to take part in every year, and that's called Christie's Missing. It's hosted by Berner of Berner's Bookish Adventures and a couple of others, but mostly Berner this year. And it runs for 11 days in early December, the 11 days when Agatha Christie mysteriously went missing and then, turned up again alive and saying that she'd sort of had temporary amnesia. Anyway, one of the prompts is to read something by Agatha Christie. So I am. I'm going to read Five Little Pigs, which is one of her Poirot novels. It came out in 1942. And the other reason for picking that one is it's also the FOMO book club choice. FOMO book club's run by Jack and Gemma. And it was there. It's the November-December book for that. So came together beautifully. And I love reading Agatha Christie at any time of the year, but particularly this time of year. Another of the Christie's Missing prompts, and the other one I'm going to do, is to read a book that's in some way inspired by or influenced by Agatha Christie. And I've picked this one. Okay, this is the Honjin Murders. It's by Seishi Yokomizo. It was originally published in Japan in kind of magazines, I think, in 1946. So, not that long after Five Little Pigs. But the author had read a lot of Golden Age detective fiction, so by people like Christie, but also, American detective writers too, and loved them. And he'd been writing before the war, but this, just after the Second World War, was his first crime novel, his first detective novel. It was translated relatively recently into English and by Louise Kawai in 2019, and it's a Pushkin Press publication. If you don't know Pushkin, they're really good in different sorts of translated fiction, and Pushkin Vertigo particularly is crime. I haven't read much, or maybe any Japanese crime fiction, but I know it's a strong genre, and this was from the sort of earlier days of it as a genre, Japanese crime fiction. It's a locked room mystery, and it also introduces a character who has become Yokomizo's sort of running and very popular private detective protagonist in a number of his books. So you can see the Agatha Christie kind of inspiration overlap, can't you? If I associate kind of Christmassy, December-y reading with crime, another association that many people have and have since Victorian times is with reading ghost stories at Christmas. And Vin of Revenant Reads and a group of other booktubers kind of encourage us to get in that Victorian ghost story spirit with a reading a-thon called Ghosts of Christmas Past. And there's a group read for that, which is The Signalman by Charles Dickens, which is very appropriate because Charles Dickens's Christmas Carol was perhaps, one of the things that really made people associate ghost stories and Christmas. And so The Signalman is the group read that came out in 1866, I think. So about 20 years after The Christmas Carol. So I will be reading that. Hope it's convincingly spooky. I'm also going to be rereading A Christmas Carol because why not? I end up rereading it many Christmases. This was 1843, and you say was the first of Dickens's kind of Christmassy stories, and which often had a ghost story element. This is also part of another kind of reading event that I somehow have got myself caught up in, and that is Victorian Christmas, and it's led by Katie of Books and Things, and there's a Discord server for it, bit, and I'll put a link to that. And it's lasting for the first 3 weeks of December, and this is week 1. Week 2 is The Rose and the Ring by William Makepeace Thackeray. Now, that's from 1854. It will be a reread for me because I originally read it as a child. I can only half remember it. I know that it's kind of like a bit of a fairy story, but what I didn't know or didn't sort of realise reading it as a child is that it's a bit of a spoof fairy tale. It's satirical. So you can read it as a child, just as a story, or you can read it as an adult and see Thackeray's sort of double meanings going on. So that's week 2, and definitely would read that. And then I might as well do week 3, mightn't I? And week 3 is The Christmas Hirelings by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, who's a Victorian writer that I've just started to get into. Read a couple of things by her. She's best known for Lady Audley's Secret. And The Christmas Hirelings, not a ghost story, it's or a fairy tale. It's a sort of contemporary, heartwarming, sort of slightly sort of sentimental, Christmassy sort of tale from 1894. So those are those. Now, if that sounds like, oh goodness, you're getting a bit carried away, Roz, should bear in mind that all of those are either short stories or kind of novella length. But I am going to try and read 2 slightly, more substantial Victorian novels this December because I love reading Victorian things at Christmas. And one of those is this one, Thomas Hardy, The Trumpet Major. Now, this was Hardy's 7th novel. You probably will have gathered by now that I'm taking part in a longer project led by Jen the Librarian to read all of Hardy's novels in publication order. And, I started out thinking, I'll just read the ones that I haven't read yet, so that way I'll get to kind of complete my reading of Hardy's novels. But as we've gone along, I've kind of just got so caught up that I started also rereading ones that I've read long ago, and that's true of this one. I did read this long ago. I remember it as being historical fiction. I think it's Hardy's only historical fiction. It's set in Napoleonic times, as you can tell from this sort of slightly tacky cover of someone, dressed up in Napoleonic uniform, and it's Hardy. I know I'm going to enjoy it. I know it's going to be great. And thank you, Jen, for getting me into that, and the lovely group of readers on Discord that are taking part in that. It's not too late to join, we're only halfway through. Now, I'm also hoping to read, or I should say to at least read part of, because it is so long, Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. Now, Hardy, I'm sort of taking part in publication order to sort of fill in the gaps and read everything by Hardy. I'm also gradually working through, in a more kind of focused way, than in recent years, trying to read the Dickens novels that I've never read instead of regularly rereading the ones that I like best, because of course you never know whether there might be another one that would be a favourite too. And I've heard really good things about Dombey and Son, which is one that I'd sort of swerved in the past. So I'm going to give this a shot in December. But I won't mind if it rolls into January as well. I won't necessarily hurry it. I've got lots of other plans, and we'll see. Who knows? But I've got this on audio as well as in paper, and sometimes that can get me through a big, fat, rich, enjoyable novel in more timely fashion. Perhaps I'll listen to it while doing some kind of Christmas baking. Then, last two books I have are, and that I'm very keen to read in December, are both, rather than sort of Victorian classics, they're sort of modern classics, or more recent backlist, but still from a while ago. And one is The Besieged City by Clarice Lispector. Now, I've talked about with Hardy and Dickens that I'm gradually kind of working my way through their novels that I haven't yet read, because they're authors that I love. And Lispector is another of those authors, a slightly more modern one. She's Brazilian, so some of her things have only more recently become available in translation. This one, The Besieged City, is from 1949, but the translation came out in 2019, and it was translated by Johnny Lorenz, who is one of her great translators in recent years. I'm buddy reading it with Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. We've read Lispector together before, so I know that will be good. I'm a bit obsessed with Clarice Lispector. I think, why? Because it's like she has the most extraordinary mind that she brings to her writing, and her books are odd and sometimes quite visceral and sometimes quite confusing, and yet I find them curiously addictive. If you've never read any Lispector and want some suggestions of where to start with her, put it in the comments. I love to share. I love to share my love of Lispector. Now, the very last book on my sort of TBR pile of possibilities is an author that I have never read. And that is Laszlo Krasznahorkai. And obviously, I'm slightly embarrassed now that I've never read anything by this Hungarian author, because he just won the Nobel Prize for Literature for 2025. And funnily enough, I've had this one on my shelf for a few years and never got around to it. It's called Satan Tango. It's set on a collective farm that's kind of failing, so in sort of late communist period Hungary. It was published in Hungarian in 1985, but this translation by George Sertzes was into English, came out in 2012. So, more recently. I understand that it's in 12 chapters from 12 sections, I think from 12 different perspectives, or maybe 6 different perspectives, and it works like a tango in that you take 6 steps forward and 6 steps back. How intriguing. I looked up an old Guardian review from 2012 when the translation came out, and the reviewer described this book as a monster and said that it is so miserable that it almost becomes funny. Doesn't sound particularly great. I think the only Christmassy thing about this book is the fir trees on the cover. So that's the last of my probably slightly ambitious plans. But then between Christmas and New Year, I usually get quite a lot of nice reading time in that holiday period. So fingers crossed that this all works out. And I hope you have brilliant December plans.